So taken together, these things protect cells in your body when they're in stressful situations. It may be due to trauma, may be due to aging, it may be due to disease processes. But that group of genes all have the same kind of dimmer switch, and NRF2 is the protein that can reach those dimmer switches and turn them up or down. So it's responsible for that. It's been called the master regulator of antioxidant gene expression. So how does that work in a cell? This large green oval represents a human cell. And that little purple gizmo in the upper right, labeled a NRF2 activator, is one of the 5 active ingredients in Protandim. And so as that NRF activator approaches a human cell, it binds at a specific site. It's called a receptor on the cell surface. The analogy I'm going to use is if this big cell is your home, that NRF2 activator just stepped on the front porch, and it did something. It pushed your doorbell. It rings, causes a reaction inside the house, in this case, inside the cell. What is that reaction? Well, if it were the doorbell, you may be sitting on the sofa watching TV, and suddenly you get up, you do something, you have a response. Inside the cell, the same thing happens. When NRF2 rings the doorbell, as it were, an enzyme called a kinase, what it does is not terribly important, but it's one of these 25,000 gene products, and it's doing its job here to realize that NRF2 needs to be activated. So this NRF2 activator, by activating the kinase, brings about a chemical reaction, and there you see a little round red protein labeled NRF2. That's our signal molecule, messenger molecule. And it's being held inside the cell, but outside the nucleus by another protein here labeled KEAP1. Because this kinase physically changes the NRF2, and you can see there it's put a little yellow phosphate group on it, change in structure. And that change brings about a release of NRF2 from that blue protein that's been holding it out in the green part of the cell, allows it to diffuse into the nucleus where all those genes are housed. And once in there, it has access to all those dimmer switches, the 500 that control the NRF2 regulated genes. And so some of them will go up, some of them will go down, because NRF2 has entered the vault where the blueprints are kept. And this may seem like hand-waving, it may seem like a fantasy. Every step of this is true. It's simplified a little bit, as you might guess. And if I showed you the real science, you probably would have trouble following it. But that's what happens. And the analogy is not much different than if somebody rings your doorbell, you get up, answer the door, it tells you, go to the kitchen, and you enter that room of the house. And once in there, you can turn on switches. That's what NRF2 does. And when those switches are turned on, these 3 groups of genes that I just talked to you about are up and down regulated, depending on what they do. So antioxidant enzymes are expressed, more antioxidant enzyme protection. Antifibrotic genes are expressed, anti-inflammatory genes are expressed. And some genes are turned down, the ones that are pro-fibrotic and pro-inflammatory, because they're switches that cause things to happen and cause things not to happen. And the result is that cell is now protected from stress.